tuned in to the Andrew Lawton Show.
Nevertheless, remember SNC-Lavalin, big scandal a few years back. The media cared about it for all of 5 minutes. And then the RCMP decided it would investigate, but didn't really get anywhere. It didn't result in any charges. Now, we've got for the first time some information about exactly why they didn't push that probe further. Documents obtained by Democracy Watch show that it was actually the government that blocked a lot of very key documents from the RCMP, hiding it under the veil of cabinet confidence. Joining me now is the co-founder of Democracy Watch, Duff Conacher. Duff, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on today.
My pleasure.
So let's start first off with what these documents really revealed. I know you have to contend, as anyone who has experience with ATIPs does, with a litany of redactions, but there was actually a fair bit of information in these.
Yes, and what the documents reveal is, from my opinion, the RCMP rolled over like a lapdog, did a very superficial investigation, only interviewed 3 people, relied a lot on the ethics commissioner's report that found Trudeau guilty of violating the federal ethics law. Didn't really try to get the cabinet communications, internal and secret, that the cabinet refused to give them. Could have gone to court to get a court order, a warrant for that, but decided not to for, I think, unjustifiable reasons. And then there was a 2-year delay by the top officers after they received the initial assessment report, which really was an investigation. The RCMP just didn't want to call this an investigation publicly, but it was an investigation. And they should have announced that they were investigating way back in 2020. And the top officers essentially didn't make a decision on that assessment report for almost 2 years, and then rolled over and let everyone off without even allowing an open court to make that decision. Instead, made it behind closed doors, very secret and unjustifiable.
You touch on a number of important aspects of this. The one, I think, is just the lack of curiosity. I mean, I would hope that if the RCMP were investigating a murder or a fraud of some kind, and they run up against a bit of a roadblock, someone doesn't want to hand over information, they wouldn't just say, oh, okay, well, thanks anyway, we tried, and move on. But that's really what they did here. I mean, they had tools available. It wasn't just that they were up against this impenetrable force, it's that they didn't even really try.
From start to finish, there's lots of questions about this, especially when you compare it to, for example, the RCMP's investigation of Jason Kenney's leadership race and allegations about wrongdoing in that in Alberta. They announced that it was an investigation. They've been given regular updates. Doug Ford and the Greenbelt scandal in Ontario, RCMP, after having it referred to them by the OPP just a couple of months later, announced an investigation. Presumably they're going to, and are in Alberta and are going to in Ontario, use subpoenas, try and get search warrants, because you have to check all the communications on every device for everyone involved in these decisions to determine whether it crosses the line. And if you don't do it, it's essentially a cover-up. And then a 2-year delay on the assessment report. They accepted all the cabinet's claims that everything they were doing was for good reasons, not for wrong reasons. I mean, it just raises a lot of questions about whether the RCMP is independent enough to actually investigate political wrongdoing in Canada, especially at the federal level.
We saw, just to bring another story into this for a moment, during the Public Order Emergency Commission, the government hide behind solicitor-client privilege, which is sacrosanct in the legal system, as it should be. But there was really no mechanism to challenge that. They kind of just assert it, and that's that. And we see cabinet confidence increasingly used in the same way, where there's not really a powerful arbiter of whether cabinet confidence is being appropriately invoked in a way that is kind of keeping with transparency as what's supposed to be, I think, the basis of a democracy.
It's the most abused loophole in the so-called freedom of information laws across the country. They really should be called the Guide to Hiding Information from the Public that the Public Has a Right to Know Acts, because that's what they are. And we're still chasing after the documents. More than half of the documents that the RCMP determined are covered by our request by Democracy Watch, more than 4,000 pages, more than half of them have not been disclosed. because they are reviewing whether they are cabinet confidences. And if they then send us a bunch of redacted documents claiming cabinet confidence, then we plan to go to court to challenge that, because I doubt that most of them are, actually. And the Supreme Court is reviewing this issue right now and reviewing the scope of that in a case that came out of Ontario and requests the Ontario government. And hopefully they will narrow the scope of that, because most of the things that are claimed as cabinet confidence really are not. And advice to cabinet, another very much abused loophole in our so-called freedom of information laws across the country.
You've got the cabinet confidence loophole, and then you also have the RCMP, which has historically been, I think, one of the worst institutions in Canada for its own access to information obligations. And I'm wondering, kind of in your sense, that you had access to these documents, yes, but if this is what was unredacted, I always have to wonder, well, what's in the redacted stuff?
Yes, and as you had mentioned before, a lot of the documents, really only 7 documents, had not been disclosed before out of the 19 they disclosed to us. And again, we filed this request in July 2022. They responded in May saying there's only 96 pages, 86 of them have to be redacted because the investigation is still ongoing. Turns out, actually, the investigation had ended in January 2023, 4.5 months before. So it was just a false claim. And also, there weren't just 96 pages. We received a letter in July saying, actually, there's more than 4,000 pages, and now we're reviewing them. Now we have 1,815 of those more than 4,000. The rest still being withheld to be reviewed for cabinet confidence. Just to remind people, documents are supposed to be disclosed within 30 days, and you can get it up to 60-day extension if you have a lot of documents to review. We filed this request in July 2022. We're now in October 2023 and still waiting for more than half the documents. And again, under this blanket loophole for cabinet confidence, when most of them probably are not cabinet confidences. The other ones that were withheld and what they have disclosed cited the solicitor-client privilege loophole that you've cited before. And this is not the way these things should be done. There should have been a special prosecutor selected by all the party leaders, not by the ruling party attorney general. So you get someone independent overseeing these investigations with a commitment to issue a public report at the end explaining, if no one's prosecuted, why they were not prosecuted. And the RCMP just refuses to do things that way, even though in several provinces, special prosecutors have been appointed in these kind of situations in the past.
So just to put a fine point on that, you think there needs to be basically a public inquiry into, I mean, not the disclosure aspect, but the core actions that are at the core of this disclosure of, why the RCMP seemed to so easily abandon, one might even say cover up this abandonment of its investigation into the government.
Yes, needs to be a public inquiry. Also, going forward, we need a dedicated anti-corruption police force that is far more independent from the federal cabinet or any provincial cabinet than the RCMP is. Quebec has one, came out of their construction scandal, corruption in the construction industry scandal. And the other provinces need it, and so does the federal level. And the head of that police force and everyone's staff there have to be appointed not by the ruling party, but by all party leaders. And in this case, we need a special inquiry, public inquiry with an inquiry commissioner selected by all party leaders in the same way that the inquiry commissioner has been for the inquiry into foreign interference in our politics. That's how these appointments have to be made. If someone hands you a job, then you owe them. And the ruling party hands out the jobs for all the key watchdog positions at the federal level in several provinces. Only a few provinces is it an all-party committee that makes these appointments. And that's the way it has to be done to have independent and effective enforcement of key democratic good government laws.
Duff Conacher, co-founder of Democracy Watch. Thanks for coming on and for your work on this stuff.
Thank you. I'll keep you updated as we continue to chase after those other more than 2,000 pages.
Please do. And it might be a couple of years before the next release comes, but we'll have you back on then. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to The Andrew Lawton Show. Support the program by donating to True North at www.tnc.news.